want to cover something that I covered the other day. Some people had questions. It's got to do with whether we went to the moon or not. You know, we had these folks in 1969, Armstrong, Collins, and Aldrin, and they were the WASPs, you know, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, I guess, right? Maybe some of them are Catholic for all I know. Anyways, you can see the typical people they sent out into space in those days. And this time they went with the diversity folk. Okay, they had a black guy, a woman, Canadian, and an American. So you can see how times have changed. Okay, for better or for worse, times have changed. Okay, so what did these people do? Well, they went to the moon allegedly, and they did a flyby the moon. Okay, and they were there for like 10 days total time. They didn't land. They just did a flyby and then came back to Earth. They didn't pick up any moon rocks, nothing. It was just to see if they could make it, round trip. That was it. Okay, and some people suspect that this never happened, that in fact Neil Armstrong and his buddies, Aldrin and Collins, did not make it either to the moon. They have this idea that this was filmed in Hollywood, okay, with a cameraman behind them. And this comes a lot because of a movie that was there once in, I think it was 1978, and it was known as Capricorn 1. And supposedly it was like this. It was some astronauts that were sent to the moon, to the Mars, and said, would you be shocked to find out that the greatest moment of our recent history may not have happened at all? Recent history, what were they talking about? Well, they were talking about the moon landings. That's what they were talking about. And so it was great for the movie, but terrible for, the space project, because people said, hey, what if they really fooled us? What if this was just a hoax? Okay? And so I raised the following questions, man. And I just want you to look at the issues, okay? Stick to the issues, and you won't get hurt, okay? So here it is. Humans did have the technology to send unmanned spacecrafts to the moon. Some people don't even recognize that. They say it's impossible. Okay, fine. You can believe whatever you want. But most people believe that unmanned spacecrafts have gone to the moon. A lot of people say that, or some of the dissidents, the people who are conspiracists, they say that the question is not the unmanned, it's the question of manned. Can you send manned spacecrafts to the moon? Okay, now you have a Mariner 4 flyby to the moon, to Mars in 1965, even before these fellows went to the moon. And again, a lot of people don't believe that these rockets can go through space. And apparently, these people sent NASA, right? Sent Mariner up to all the way up to Mars and back. Not one of them landed. They just went and did a flyby. Okay, we do put satellites in orbit. Some people don't believe that. They think when your phone works through like a tin can, sardine can, and with a little string tied to it. And so they don't believe that satellites are out there in orbit. But then everybody can prove that to themselves to some degree, right? If they really are skeptical about that. The ISS is orbiting the Earth every hour, okay? It goes around the Earth, very high up there. It's a big monster of a lab, you could say, right? A docking area. And the issue is that, NASA publishes the schedule for the ISS. So you can take your telescope or your friend's telescope or ask someone out there that you trust to look at the sky when the ISS is passing by, and you'll see this big monster that took 10 years to build orbit the Earth. And what does that mean? It means that in order to build the ISS, it took them 10 years because you got to build part by part. And I showed that the other day. I'm not going to show that again. So the issue is that there is this ISS flying monster out there. It was built over time, by over 10 years. And so the question is, you can prove that to yourself. We do have stuff out there in space. So there are satellites. There is the ISS. You know, if you want to continue being skeptical about all that, it's just, you know, like Galileo's cardinals. They didn't want to look through a scope to find out that Jupiter had 4 moons orbiting around it. And then the Soviet government, it did not contradict the U.S. Remember, the Soviets and the U.S. were terrible enemies. They were undergoing what is known as the Cold War. And, you know, they didn't say, oh, the U.S. is lying, it's all a hoax, don't believe them. They never said that. They acknowledged that the U.S. went to the moon, and they could have, you know, said the opposite, told their people that it was all fake, okay? And then the last one there, suffice to say first that more errors you find with, you know, with the moon landing, the less tenable is your conspiracy argument. And let me tell you why, okay? What's the alternative? It means that this was all filmed on Earth. That's what you're essentially arguing. At least that's what the most conspiracists argue, that it was built, it was all filmed in Hollywood. I'll mention Hollywood because it's the most proper place to film something such as a thing, you know. So it was filmed in Hollywood. And the issue there is that here you have all these millions of dollars invested in this program, in this project, right? And now they're going to try to persuade the public that, hey, we did actually go to the moon. Let's assume it's all fake, it's all a hoax, okay? They're going to film it in Hollywood. Well, let me tell you, and they have all these people who counsel them. You know, you have engineers in there, you have technicians of all kinds, biologists, whatever. I mean, if they're going to spend millions of dollars, they're going to have a whole troop of people out there aiding and counseling the directors and all the people who make the film. Okay, so what's the story? The story is that film had better not have any errors. If it has any errors whatsoever, it couldn't have been filmed in Hollywood. Now, you know, I mentioned the other day that, you know, and let's assume, you know, a scenario where the director films this movie, not a comedy, but a real movie where you have the gladiator, he's fighting with a sword, another one in the Colosseum, and it turns out he's got a wristwatch, a Rolex on his wrist. And you say, whoa, how did that get into the movie, you know? And usually they cut those scenes and they redo them or whatever. They're not going to let something like that out in a regular movie. But, you know, there could be an error that nobody caught, and it's just made it to the screen, and someone out there, you know, someone who's watching the movie says, oh, look at that error. Okay, so there could be one error, maybe, possible. But when you find so many errors as you see in the Wikipedia, there's a whole page of all the errors. You know, the lighting is wrong, the gravity is wrong, the stars in the background are not there, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of arguments, okay? And again, I don't want to hear the arguments about how your grandmother, you know, is in the hospital and she's suffering. Don't tell me any other theory. We just need to address one issue and one issue only. And that is, if the movie was made in Hollywood with the counseling of all the experts of NASA going down there, it had better not have any errors. If it has one error, well, you know, could be. Let's figure that out. Let's find out if it is an error or maybe something you don't understand about physics. But if you can find 100 errors like you see in the Wikipedia page, well, for sure it could not have been done on Earth. Okay? So don't tell me all the errors that NASA made when they sent the probe to the moon. Tell me, how is it that the directors in Hollywood made so many errors and released this film to the public? That's what you got to answer. It's the other way around, okay? So the more errors you find, the weaker your position is as a conspiracist. Now, I want to clarify, you know, I think that there are conspiracies out there. There are people who do things that government many times tries to mislead you. And on this one, I'm saying that, well, I'm 90% sure myself, right? I'm convinced that they went to the moon. I always leave a little bit out there because, you know, they could have fooled me. That's possible. I'm not saying that's not the case. I'm just saying right now, I have no explanation whatsoever. Okay? I have no explanation for all the errors that you find, at least in the Wikipedia. There's probably other places that mention them as well. I cannot answer that. That's what I cannot answer. Okay, so please answer the question for me. How come they made so many errors? Okay, that's the issue you got to deal with.